that you would open our ears to hear what it is you want to say to each of us individually. And that as the words come out of my mouth, that they would be interpreted by your Spirit to each of our spirits here, to be the exact message that you want our hearts individually to hear. God, we trust you. We trust you that even in the times when it doesn't make sense what's going on around us, that you are in control and that you are working all things together for the good of those who love you, who are called according to your purpose. God, you're so wonderful and faithful. Open our hearts, soften our hearts, give us soft hearts toward you, that you can mold it and shape it like the faithful creator and faithful potter that you are. God, you're so good. I thank you for that. So there's a moment that pretty much all of us who live here in northern Michigan know. We know it all too well. It's that moment when it's late, the house is quiet. Almost reminds you a little bit of that poem. 'Twas the night before Christmas, and all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. It doesn't just happen on Christmas. It's silent. The loudest noise in the house is the hum of the refrigerator. And then, as you listen to that refrigerator hum and kick out, a few minutes later, kick back in and hum again, all of a sudden, nothing. There's no warning, no announcement of what's going to happen, no letter in the mail, no drama about it at all. Nothing. Silence through the whole house. The yard light outside the bedroom window, off, goes dark. The soft tick, 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 tick of the ceiling fan slows, tick, 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 until it too finally stops. All the familiar outlines in the house as you look around, the dresser, the door, the table, they all soften until they blend into the background. You can't even see them anymore. They completely disappear. And suddenly, something that you've forgotten all day long, and that is how dark it really gets without light. Not scary movie dark, just kind of disorienting. Excuse me, folks. I forgot to do that. Done. So it's dark in the house. Nothing scary, just not what you are used to at night. You're suddenly reminded how dark it gets. So as you're moving around the house, you actually start moving a little bit slower. Like I've learned to take a little bit of a sidestep because I've broken a lot of toes on corners. I put my hands out instinctively, feeling for the wall because it's completely dark, and oh, there it is. And suddenly, boom, there's the door frame that I thought was over here. So I walk into it, and you become aware of the corners, the edges, the obstacles that were always there, but you never had to really think about them when the lights are on, right? You're walking and you see them. So it's just kind of one of those instinctive things. But now you don't, when it's dark, you don't just stand in the middle of the room and start shouting at the darkness, "Darkness, what are you doing?" You just look around and start feeling for the light, looking for your cell phone or something that can produce some sort of light so you can see. Feeling on for the light switch, which isn't going to work anyhow because the electricity is off. But you just look for it because light doesn't bother arguing with the darkness. When you find a light and you turn it on, it just invades. Doesn't ask permission. It just comes in and makes the room livable again. So those of us who live here in northern Michigan, we understand this because it happens at least a couple times a year. When night settles in, out here, especially in the Lachine area, there are no street lights, no giant halo from the town lights, traffic glow from the headlights, nothing to really help you see. I find it because I can look up, and when I lived in Phoenix, I could maybe make out a couple of the stars, but out here you can see a whole bunch of those stars. I like that. So, but when you don't have all that light around you, even a single porch light from way down the road can act like a beacon, like a monument, helping to orient you. Oh, there it is. I know that who has that light, so I know which is north and south. So Jesus lived in a world like that. There was no light switch on the wall in Jesus' house, in his home in Capernaum. There was no ambient glow from town. And when night arrived, buddy, it got dark. And I do mean dark. People just planned around it, though. They just understood. They moved carefully around through it. They made sure that if there was something that needed to be done during the day, during the light, you do it during the day, right? So they just learn to live carefully because darkness wasn't a social metaphor then. It was a reality that surrounded them every night. So when Jesus sat down on a hillside and began talking, like we've been discussing, walking up that mountainside and sitting down and starting to talk to the people, he wasn't just talking about an inspirational story, not reciting poetry. He was actually revealing what it looks like to live as light in a world where losing your way is easy, where most people don't even realize just how dark their world has become. Because before the hill, before the blessings that we're talking about in the Beatitudes, before the talk of salt and bushel baskets, the King of creation was already at work, turning the lights on. See, by the time Jesus walks up the side of that mountain, word has already begun to spread as far as Syria. Brilliant marketing strategy, not because he was trying to draw a crowd, but because people can't stop talking about it when hope shows up and becomes very real to them. They'll talk about it all the time to anybody who will listen. They came from nearby villages. Some walked from miles. If they're coming from Syria, that's a 7-day journey. So they're coming, they're pretty desperate if they're coming on a 7-day journey in that day, just this man that they'd heard about. They're bringing their children. Some are bringing their questions. Some are bringing wounds that nobody was able to heal. Couldn't touch. When they arrive, they at that hillside, and they look, and there was absolutely nothing impressive about that. There was no platform, no banners, no flutter flags. There was no music rolling across the hillside, not the latest Hillsong or Bethel music. There were no guards controlling the crowds, no traffic guys with the little cones and the lighted things that sticks in their hands. There was just a rabbi sitting down on the ground. The grass beneath him had been pressed flat. The air, well, smells like dirt and dry grass and probably sweat. Because I'm not so sure about their shower facilities in the area. But as you stand there, you can feel the wind rolling off the Sea of Galilee. The babies are fussing. Stomachs are starting to growl. Some of the people are starting to be in need of some serious anger management. So this is not a polished crowd that's with Jesus on this mountainside. They're not the religious elite from Jerusalem. They didn't come up from the temple. They're not the powerful, not politically connected. They're not the influencers on TikTok. Knows them. The famous people. These are largely blue-collar workers. They're fishermen. They have cracked and split hands. I have no idea how many hooks they've gone all the way through that. How many rope burns that they've had on those hands from working with those nets. These are laborers with sore backs, mothers who've buried children, fathers who are tired of feeling completely powerless and hopeless. The people with Jesus on that mountainside are people living under the oppressive Roman rule, taxed into poverty, who know what it feels like to be overlooked and overrun. I want you to notice something else here. Jesus didn't arrive on an emperor's horse. He walked. He sat down among them. Somebody who was not afraid of being close to them. And then he starts to talk. And when he starts to speak, he doesn't start off giving a list of demands and commands. He doesn't begin with correction. He doesn't open up with, now, here's what you've all been doing wrong. Number one. That's not how he does it. He starts with blessing them. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the meek. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. See, to ears like those that were listening to Jesus on that mountainside that day, these things would have been strange, odd, because none of these things sound like success. Poor in spirit, mourning, not something I've typically woke up in the morning to. God, let me mourn. Let me be sad. Let me be poor. I don't think any one of us here have said that. But poverty of spirit wasn't admired in that day. Mourning wasn't celebrated. Meekness wasn't rewarded, and hunger most definitely was not a virtue that anybody wanted. What they were just conditions, parts of life that you survive, you trudge through, you get through, because there's nothing you can do about it except get through it. And yet Jesus looks at these tired, these worn out people, the overlooked in the crowd, and he says, you are not cursed. You're not forgotten. You're not disqualified. He tells them who the kingdom is transforming them to be before he tells them how they should live. And that matters. Because Jesus is not gathering a crowd to impress them. He's building a people that he can trust, shaped from the inside out, whose lives will quietly carry his presence. A people whose very presence will intercept darkness without ever needing a spotlight on them. This hillside is not a rally. It's a transformation ground. And everything he says here will flow out of what he's already doing in their hearts on that mountainside. So Jesus looks out at the crowd. He sees the lines on their faces from the weather, the dry and peeling from the sunburns. He knows their stories better than the people who are living them. And then he says something that would have sounded, again, odd to the people. He says in Matthew 5:7, "Blessed are the merciful, for they shall receive mercy." To us, this sounds gentle. Maybe a little bit predictable. But to them, this would have landed kind of harshly. Mercy in their world has boundaries, has limitations. I mean, sure, in that day you were merciful to your own people, to your family. Neighbors maybe. But mercy stayed within a certain circle around you. It was limited. You didn't just offer it to everybody. I mean, tax collectors, definitely outside that circle. Those were outside of it. The Romans, most. Mercy was most often reduced to basically in-group kindness. In a world under Roman occupation, that made sense. When you've been wronged enough, for long enough, retaliation starts like justice a little bit. Starts to feel like survival. But Jesus doesn't say, "Blessed are those who protect themselves," or "Blessed are those who avenge themselves." He says, "Blessed are the merciful." Not because mercy is soft, but because mercy is strong enough to stop the destructive cycles in people's lives. Mercy says, this pattern ends with me right now. Because mercy refuses to keep passing that pain forward. Pain was given to me, I'm just going to pass it forward. Mercy stops it right there. It absorbs the blow and it ends the exchange. And the reason that we can absorb the blow is because Jesus first absorbed it for us. And that's where this hits close to home for these people. Because here in northern Michigan, it hits home for us because we understand self-reliance. We take pride in it, really. We care for our own. We pull our weight. We don't ask for much. We help each other out. When we see a need, we'll step in and we'll help them. And Jesus doesn't miss all of that. But then he goes and he quietly erases that circle so that mercy is for everybody. Because mercy isn't about who deserves it. I'm thankful for that. Because if it were, none of us would qualify. Not one of us. Mercy is about refusing to let bitterness and offense dictate our future. It's choosing not to return the same sharp sword to the one who thrust it at us. Mercy is ending the rehearsal over and over in your head of the same old grievance again and again and again, deciding not to harden your heart, because the hardness that fights back against the wounds is the same compacted soil that resists the seed of humbleness, godly sorrow, meekness. And make no mistake, mercy feels weak to the heart that has become walled off. Mercy costs something. It costs pride. It costs the right to be right, the right to be vindicated. It costs the satisfaction of watching someone else get what they deserve, get their comeuppance. Well, they deserved that. But mercy does something very powerful and very different. It creates space for water to reach the parched places in your heart. It creates space for light to push back the darkness. It interrupts the slow decay of relationships in families, in marriages, in communities, where we're about as close sometimes. It stops the quiet rot of that bitterness and offense bring into families, into churches that fracture and split apart, into communities. So Jesus looks into the eye of the people who have every reason to be resentful, every reason to be guarded. They're occupied by the Romans who do not treat them well. But he looks them in the eye and he says, the ones who dare to break the cycle, those are truly blessed. Because mercy doesn't change the person in front of you. It changes what happens next. Matthew 5:8 says, blessed are the pure in heart, for they shall see God. Now that sentence right there would have got the attention of most people. Because in Jesus' day, purity was a very familiar word. It was part of their everyday life, part of their religious function. In Jesus' day, they heard that word every day, but it didn't mean what they all thought it meant. See, all across Israel, there were ritual baths called mikvah. Thousands of them. Archaeologists have found them all over Israel. There were stone steps leading down into the water, kind of like a baptistry that we have behind me here. The steps would go down. They were carefully measured, precisely sized, well maintained. A mikvah washing wasn't valid, though, unless it was filled with living water. Now, what's living water? Well, that's water flowing from a spring, naturally. Rainwater gathered and funneled into the bath, water flowing naturally and not hauled by human effort. So you couldn't just put water in a bucket and take it over to the bath and the bath. It had to be living water flowing. People washed before prayer. They washed before worship. They washed before entering the temple. And when they did, they had to get down all the way covered. If even a single hair was above the water, it invalidated the whole thing. And they were not ritually pure. So it was a simple idea. You just wash the dirt of the world off your hands, off your body, so you can stand in the presence of God. Purity as a Jewish custom, though, was a cleanliness ritual that you performed. It was physical. It was visual. It was measurable. And then Jesus comes. He sits down on the grass on this side of this mountain. Not a temple in sight, not a mikvah to be found anywhere. No ritual baths. And he says, blessed are the pure in heart. So how do we get pure? Is what they're thinking in that day. He says this to people not with properly washed hands, because there was no mikvah, not fresh, clean clothing. They've been walking for days. There was no outward compliance with what they knew in their religious rituals to be purity. So he says, pure in heart. And with that one sentence, Jesus shifts the entire conversation. Because true purity cannot be made by human effort. And that's the part that Jesus is addressing here. See, there's a difference between being ritually clean and being pure in heart. You can wash the dust off your hands and still be unclean before God. And you could be covered in dust and even cow manure and still be pure in heart. So, Jesus here is not dismissing purity as they knew it. He's revealing the true definition of what it is. He's saying scrubbing the outside doesn't earn an audience with God. It's a heart fully aligned with Him that begins to see God clearly. Not that purity earns a glimpse of God, but that an undivided heart will not miss seeing Him. See the difference there? Jesus is addressing the impurities of the heart, the mixed motives, the hidden resentment, the quiet compromise, the divided loyalties. Things that no ritual bath can touch. And when someone enters a mikvah, the immersion has to be complete. Not a toe, not a hand, not even a single hair can be above the surface. So when Jesus says, blessed are the pure in heart, He's not talking about good intentions. He's not talking about anything having to do with your own effort. He's describing what happens when the heart is no longer divided. Not 90% surrendered, 10% hidden. Not part God's kingdom and part self-protection. He's talking about a heart that is fully immersed in God's presence. Because Jesus isn't dismissing purity, He's redefining it. Not as something you scrub onto your life or off of your life, but something you receive by fully surrounding yourself with God's grace. And when people emerge from the water, Jewish tradition often referred to it as kind of a rebirth. You went in one way, you came out new. So when Jesus says the pure in heart will see God, He's not talking about eyesight seeing God. He's talking about a new way of living. A heart so aligned with God that it begins to recognize Him not just in the sacred places, not just in the church sanctuary, but in the ordinary places, in the aisles at Elam, in the Northland Market, in the marathon over here off of 32. That's what He's talking about. In conversations, in interruptions wherever we're going. In moments where mercy suddenly makes sense. Jesus is preparing them for something. He's forming a people who don't just talk about the light, but can actually carry it everywhere they go. And that kind of heart doesn't come from ritual. It comes only through total surrender to God. So something's happening here on this mountainside. Jesus isn't stacking virtues. He's transforming a people. Transformation always has consequences. Because what happens on the inside, eventually, it's going to come out on the outside. So a heart shaped by mercy can't help but affect the relationships in their life. A heart aligned with God cannot help but change what it sees and how it responds to what it sees. See, Jesus hasn't changed subjects here. He's revealing what inevitably follows the transformation on the inside. This is the moment where inward transformation begins to show up in the outward reality. And this matters. because many of us have been taught the reverse. We think that if we just try harder, if we just do better, if we just behave better, more faithfully, eventually our hearts will catch up. But Jesus says it's the opposite. He addresses the heart first because only the pure of heart can carry the influence without being corrupted by that influence. Only a transformed, pure heart in the difficult places without being hardened by him. Only a transformed, pure heart can carry light without turning it into a grand performance. And here, on this mountainside, is the truth that holds the whole thing together. The inward work of the Beatitudes makes the outward witness of the Beatitudes inevitable. And that outward life intercepts, do not miss this, that outward life that flows from the inward intercepts the shipwrecks that the enemy has planned for all of our neighbors. Which means ordinary faithfulness in every day by you and by me suddenly matters in eternity. The simple things. And this is where Jesus takes everything and he walks it straight into the real world. Matthew 5:9. Blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called sons of God. Now that word peacemaker is often misunderstood. It sounds gentle again. It sounds passive. Like someone who avoids conflict just to keep things calm around them. But that's not what Jesus is talking about here. Again. Now, in the world that Jesus lives in, peace was fragile. Rome called its rule peace. But the Pax Romana was peace enforced by violence. They crushed dissent. They silenced resistance. If you dare to speak up, that might be the last word you say. See, Jesus is not talking about that kind of peace. The Greek word Jesus uses here is actually arianapoios, literally peace doer. That word carries with it the idea of active reconciliation. Someone who actively and purposely steps into the broken places, who steps into hard situations. They stand between people who no longer trust each other. Someone willing to absorb tension so that something beautiful can grow from it. Peacemakers, in this context, don't pretend that conflict isn't there. Okay, they don't just sweep it under the rug and ignore it. And, if we just ignore the conflict, maybe it'll go away. People who are peacemakers don't do that. They step deliberately into the situation, carrying with them the peace of God. And that takes a transformed heart to be able to do that. Because without mercy, you'll choose sides instead of applying healing to the situation. Without purity of heart, you'll use peace to protect your image instead of restoring a relationship. Peacemaking is not weakness. It is strength under control. We've heard that phrase in the last few weeks often. It is strength under control, submitted to the Lord. It is courage shaped by humility. Peacemaking is love that refuses to let bitterness write the ending of the story. And Jesus says, peacemakers will be called sons of God. Now, in the ancient world, to be called a son of somebody meant that you carried their likeness. you acted like them. Chip off the old block. You bore the family resemblance in face, in mannerisms. I'm told that my eldest can walk into a room of people who know me, and he doesn't need to be introduced. They can tell by his mannerisms and his looks that he's related to me. Poor kid. But none of this was because that they were perfect. You're not called somebody's son because you're perfect. You're not called somebody's son because you fix everything. But because you resemble your Father. That's what God does. From the garden to the cross, God steps into brokenness instead of standing at a distance and pointing his finger at it. He doesn't wait for peace to appear. He makes peace. As a doer. Sometimes at great personal cost. So when Jesus blesses the peacemakers, he's not giving them a personality label. Not introvert, extrovert, peacemaker, violent person. What he's doing is he's calling out family resemblance. In the ancient world, to be called the son of somebody meant you bore their likeness or acted with their authority. And since God is viewed as the ultimate reconciler, those peace doers are demonstrating that they belong to his family. Roman emperors called themselves divi filius, or a son of God. They claimed authority through force. They enforced peace with swords and spears. So Jesus' statement here would not have been missed by those who were listening. It isn't the emperor, however, who is the Son of God, is what Jesus is saying, but the one creating wholeness where there was brokenness, who is the true Son of God. And as children of God, whose hearts are being transformed by him, we carry with us the powerful dwelling presence of the Holy Spirit. This means that when you, as a child of God, step into a room, God's indwelling presence and power through the Holy Spirit in you and on you brings peace to that room. And his peace that passes all understanding fills the room and changes the very atmosphere in that room. So, when Jesus says that he is sending us out like sheep among the wolves, he isn't saying that we're being sent out to be slaughtered. No, he's saying that when you walk into a room carrying that powerful indwelling presence of the Holy Spirit, God's peace fills the atmosphere and comes upon those wolves. That's what it means to be a peacemaker. Matthew 10:16 says, "Behold, I am sending you out as sheep in the midst of wolves." John 14:27 says, "I'm leaving you with a gift, peace of mind and heart. And the peace I give is a gift the world cannot give. So don't be troubled or afraid." Philippians 4:7 says, "And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus." See, peace begins to settle in rooms the peacemakers enter. Not because of their own effort, but because the Prince of Peace goes with them. Now, this is where most rooms get kind of quiet. Because most of us would rather be right than reconciled. We'd rather win the argument than absorb the cost. But Jesus looks at the crowd living under occupation, under daily frustration, daily injustice, so extreme that it would just boggle your mind. And he says, the ones who walk into the mess with mercy, the ones who refuse to let anger and bitterness have the last word, the ones who carry the peace from the Prince of Peace, the hostile ground, those are the ones who look like my Father. And that kind of life will not always be welcomed by people, by those who don't understand the way of the kingdom of God. Because when you carry peace into a broken world, you expose how broken that world really is. And not everybody takes kindly to it. See, Jesus doesn't stop with peacemaking. Matthew 5:10 says, "Blessed are those who are persecuted for righteousness' sake, for theirs is the kingdom of heaven." Now, the word blessed here is important. It actually comes from the Greek word makarios. So here's another one of those that Jesus wants to make sure we understand the real definition. When we hear blessed, we think of good times, good circumstances. Always a couple $1,000s in the bank. Always things going your way. But the Greek word makarios actually means something more than that. It describes a state of being. It's talking about a joy that doesn't come from the circumstances that surround you. It doesn't rise or fall because of applause or opposition. Totally independent of that. So Jesus isn't saying you should feel happy while you're being attacked. He's saying you've been filled with a joy that the world cannot give you, so the world can't take that joy away. Then Jesus names that pressure. Persecuted. And the Greek word for persecuted used here is dioko, which is a hunting word. It means to hound, to chase, to track something with fatal intent. He's not dramatizing it here. He's just acknowledging that we're being hunted and tracked. And some of you know what it's like to be pushed and prodded constantly. Not always with physical violence, sometimes with words, with suspicion, with tones of voice, with bullying, with being told to just tone down the Jesus stuff, all right? To keep faith private, but to teach their view of faith openly. And notice here that Jesus uses the passive voice. Blessed are those who have been persecuted. See, he's not telling us to go looking for it, to purposefully go and dig and stir up trouble and get people mad at you. He's not telling us to wear offense as a badge. He's describing what happens when the kingdom transforms and places its seal on a heart. And then what is happening on the inside naturally flows to the outside. So there's a reason for that resistance, because the enemy isn't going to bother hunting for something which he already has. I'm going to say that again. The enemy isn't going to bother hunting for something that he already has. So now this is where Jesus gets even more personal. Blessed are you when others revile you and persecute you and utter all kinds of evil against you falsely on my account. Rejoice and be glad, for your reward is great in heaven. For so they persecuted the prophets who were before you. The word revile here is onedizo. That means to stain his name, to smear their reputation. So, in Jesus' day, in the honor and shame-centric Jewish culture, your name was your life. And Jesus looks at his followers straight in the eye and he says, even then, when they smear your name, even bold-faced lying and twisting your words to destroy your reputation, which is the currency of the day, even then you're blessed. Why? Because your identity is not found in the opinions of the crowd. It's found in the one who created you, who redeemed you, who calls you by name. Isaiah 43:1 says, "Fear not, for I have redeemed you. I have called you by name. You are mine." And a little bit later in Isaiah 45:4, he says, "I call you by name. I name you." So Jesus says something that sounds impossible at first. Rejoice, be glad. And the Greek word here for glad means to joyfully celebrate with all your might. Like David when they were bringing the ark in. He danced so hard, his clothes came off. It means to celebrate. Not because you're being hunted, not because you're enjoying having them smear your name, not because having your reputation destroyed is fun. Because it's not. But because nothing is being lost that truly matters. Because you don't get your name from the people who are smearing it. You get it from God. Your reward does not live in the mouths and the opinions of those who revile you and persecute you. It's already stored up for you in heaven. So if faithfulness is costing you something, even if it's costing you everything, it may be because the King is walking this road right alongside you and is forming your heart and it's just bubbling out. And the world doesn't like how that looks and how that makes them feel. So, on that mountainside with Jesus, the breeze still moves through the grass. Children are sitting closer to their parents now. Some people are just staring at the ground. Others look off to the water, lost in their own thoughts. Jesus doesn't rush to drive home the next point. He lets the words just sit there for a moment. Mercy, purity, peacemaking, cost. There's no altar call on that mountainside. There's no swelling organ music behind him. There's just a quiet awareness settling over the crowd of what they're hearing and what is soaking into their hearts. They came to find hope. They came to find healing and change. And Jesus offers that, but he offers that so much more deeply. He shows them the kind of heart that he's forming in his people. And what kind of life that will cost. And why that kind of life is worth everything, no matter the cost. See, some of the people on that mountainside will go home to strained relationships. Some will return to the Roman oppression and an unfair system. And people calling them names. Some will be misunderstood. Some will have the bill collector knocking on their door, trying to take their kids. Some will be opposed every step of the way. But none of them will leave that mountainside unchanged. Because once you see the kingdom in this way, you can never unsee it. Once you realize that ordinary faithfulness matters eternally, that mercy interrupts the destructive cycles, that purity restores your ability to see God, that peacemaking looks like the Father. You can never go back to the small, safe faith and expect to feel satisfied again. So Jesus just remains seated on the grass right there. Not demanding, not fidgeting, not restless, not moving around, just present. And like that day with Jesus on the side of that mountain, the invitation hangs in the air like the breeze off the lake. Will you let the kingdom shape your heart? Even when it costs you something? Even when it draws criticism and social pressure? Even if it means having people completely twist and fabricate your words? Even when it means standing for the truth that others avoid? On that mountainside, the mountain didn't respond back. The crowd doesn't respond vocally to him. They simply get up. They begin to walk back into their lives. But this time they carry something different within them. Something that once revealed can never be unknown. And the rest of the story will be written on the pages of ordinary lives. Lived faithfully between mercy and resistance until the light becomes so bright that it is impossible to ignore. How will you respond? His invitation is right here for each one of us. To let him take and transform our heart. To mold it into what he created us for. Into his likeness. That we would walk in his ways, walk with him in his kingdom. And be the merciful. And the peacemakers. Who are used by him to change the world around us. Those carrying the light and the salt that we'll talk about next week. Will that be you? I invite you to surrender to him today. And if you have never walked with him, or maybe you've walked away, do know that each and every one of us have got the same problem, and that is called sin. Romans 3:23 says, "For all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God." Romans 6:23 says that because we have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God, we're all going to be sentenced to death. Because the wages of sin is death. Romans 5:8 says, while we were still sinners, here's the good news, that while we were still sinners, before we repented, Christ died for us. And Romans 10:9 says that we can receive that forgiveness from him. How? Well, it says, if we confess with our mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in our hearts that God raised him from the dead, we shall be saved. There's not a special set of words that needs to be said. Just confess with your mouth that Jesus is Lord and believe in our heart that God has raised him from the dead, we will be saved. And then he doesn't want to leave you there. He wants you to turn from the sinful ways and to walk with him. And I invite you to do that. So today, if you realize that you have not had a soft heart toward God, if you have not been walking as peacemakers or as merciful, or maybe you've tried to dull your shine, put it under one of those bushel baskets, because sometimes the heat's a little hot. People making fun of you, excluding you from things, attacking you on your Facebook page. But you want to say that you want to see God. I invite you to begin walking in those ways. And if you'd like somebody to pray with you about that, I'll be up front. We'll have members of our prayer team up front. We'd love to pray with you. If you're watching this online, I invite you to contact us. And we'd love to meet with you and pray with you. And if you're a long way away, we'd love to help connect you with a good church in your area who can help walk this with you. And if you've just given your heart to the Lord or rededicated your life to Christ, we sure love the opportunity to give you some great next steps. Love to talk with you and to pray with you about that. So I invite you to the front. For those of you remaining in your seat, I just ask that you remain in an attitude of prayer. If you need to go, you're welcome to go. Blessings on all of you. Have a great week.